Hey guys, welcome back to Forever Changed with Nick and Chelsea. We are stoked to have this chat today. It was actually Nick's idea.
It was. I'll be the proponent today of this episode.
Well, I feel like this is a topic that you and I talk a lot about, not even intentionally, but it is just interesting to have this conversation in marriage and then with friends, and then on social media it's not really had, I don't think, because of the exact reason why we're going to discuss today.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys can tell yet, but there's just this, man, I don't know what it is, but there's just this sense of like boldness, I think, that you and I have both just stepped into about stuff, about conversations, about things that just need to happen. And this is where some of it can get a little strange because there's other people who feel very similar to how we feel on many facets of which we'll discuss today. But a lot of them can be really rude about it. It's like, oh, because I'm right and you're wrong. I have the right to be rude to you or nasty or mean. And I don't think that that's correct either.
Yeah.
But today, just flat out, I want to have a conversation about culture and about this space that we exist in as believers, where we find ourselves in a time and in a day and in a political climate and a cultural climate where you run the risk, if you say the wrong thing, where you run the risk of being canceled. And that is just weird. I mean, straight up, that's weird, especially for the country and the era and the time in which we live. That if you say something that might just rub someone the wrong way because you're in love, again, don't be rude, but in love, you're telling someone the truth, and I'm not even affiliating it with like, Bible. Of course, yes, I believe the Bible is the truth. I believe it's the inerrant word of God, perfect and holy in every way. But if you're just telling someone basic common sense, that is truth. Like 2 + 2 is 4. It will always be 4. You can get targeted or labeled for having hate speech.
Yeah, so hold on.
It's weird.
Let's just take a step back because I feel like we're getting a little bit too heavy
too
right
fast
away.
Okay.
And I think we need to share.
What'd you have for breakfast this morning? Okay.
We need to share. This is something we want to start doing in every podcast. We want to share a story of somebody we know, maybe even a story of yours where you've been forever changed in some area, whatever capacity that looks like.
That's
because that's the center, great. The heart of our podcast, and
that's fantastic.
I would love for you to share, because now that this podcast has been out, there's been several weeks that have gone by since you and I went to Texas and you shared a message for some high schoolers, even some middle schoolers. Some people came to know Jesus for the very first time.
Yep.
There was a younger guy, I don't know how old he was. I think he was probably a senior. And we were in this like rec center. They were doing these activities that were based off of American Ninja Warrior. And all the kids were going crazy because it was like actually set up. It looked like an American Ninja Warrior situation. If you haven't seen that show, you wouldn't know what we're talking about, but it's so cool.
Y'all, they had the salmon ladder there.
Yeah, that's intense.
Can we just ask, maybe someone knows, so write us, DM us, whatever facet of community, send a carrier pigeon if you need to.
Carrier pigeon.
But why do they call it a salmon ladder? Do you know the answer?
Not sure.
I don't know the answer.
We'll leave a
but
little
I sure would
there.
love to, and I'm not going to Google it.
But
I'm
what I was
one of you to answer that.
going to go,
Sorry.
Where we were going with this is there was this guy that you had, I think, just kind of started talking to on the sideline. He was just kind of observing everything going on. And you just introduced yourself, and you're just saying like, hey man, how's it going? You know, like the typical bro conversation. And then that same night, Nick gave a message, and he gave another opportunity. This was like either the second or third opportunity you gave for people to come forward to commit their life to Christ. And he hadn't done it yet. I don't think he was walking with Jesus yet, but he reluctantly, like, I was sitting right behind him.
Yeah.
He reluctantly, like, came up at like the 6th time probably that you had said it on the 3rd invitation that you gave.
Mm-hmm.
Something in me like assumed, I guess, or it looked like in that group of guys that like if you go forward,
You're soft.
yeah, you're soft, you're weak. Like sometimes that can be kind of assumed, like I guess in guy circles they just feel like you have to have this strong exterior and like don't cry, don't do,
Yeah. It's like bravado.
yeah, don't
sort
like
of.
show any signs of being soft, whatever. But that's one of the most courageous things you could do is just like respond to the call of God. And he walked forward at like the very last opportunity that you gave after all the other people were already up there. And as soon as he walked back after you had prayed over them and everything, all of his guy friends got up, like hugged him. I think he ended up crying, and like it was just like such a cool moment to witness from the outside looking in, because I remember going to DNOW in my teenage years, like the middle of high school, and having almost that exact same moment happen. But for me, it was in an upper room in the church and crying with all my girlfriends and just sharing like what was going on in our lives and realizing that I wanted to follow Jesus that night. And so it's just really, really amazing to watch you, like as your wife, like step into that call, but then also realizing that it's not any of your own doing. It's like God that is just directly speaking to these kids. And
thank God it's none of my own doing, because I would mess it up if it was.
So that is a moment that I witnessed where somebody was forever changed this past few weeks. And it was really amazing. And we can't wait to share some of your guys' stories. So if you want to submit them, we have an email that you guys can email your stories to. It can be a story around marriage or friendship, like anything that you think is like a story of hope.
Send it to us.
foreverchangedpodcast@gmail.com. And we will read them. Might read them in the future. So that's my story.
Love it. Back to our regularly, how do they say it? Regularly scheduled programming. Yeah. I don't want to come off in this conversation at all feeling like there's a chip on my shoulder or I'm mad at anyone. I'm not mad at anyone. In fact, I think if I am irritated with anybody, it's probably with myself for not realizing this sooner, I think, or that thinking it would get better on its own. And a problem will never, any kind of problem. I think that this could be like one of the rules of life, is that no problem that you have, no situation you're facing will ever improve, will ever get better until it is addressed, until it is unearthed, until you dig it up, until you put some sunlight on it, expose it.
It's not going to go away.
Get some help with it, whatever needs to happen. It's not going to go away. It's
by
not
you just ignoring it.
Die. Yeah. That never happens. It never will happen. And if you can personally think of a time in your life where you had a mounting issue and you just ignored it and it all went away and it never came back again and things were just dandy.
That is a rare minority right
there.
Man,
you are one of one to ever have that happen. So, yeah, I just am not okay. And I'm tired of being quiet about it. And I'm tired of feeling like I don't want to step on someone's toes because it's bold. So about what? Great question. And I'm going to ask you about this too, because I think it's affected you in a lot of ways. I'm serious. And I think it's affecting people who are listening to this as well. But man, we go to school, we step on our university campus. And what's the first thing that's assumed about a university campus now, which I personally, I don't think is true. I think that there is so much good to forcing yourself to think outside of your comfortable box that a university atmosphere can bring. But especially public universities, what's the first thing that's assumed? It's like, oh, those like liberal, devil's playground type areas where people just get brainwashed and da 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 da. But yeah, there's this perception of thought that goes on that this is what schools are amounting to, that this is all that news cycles are amounting to, that this is all, everyday life. Like, our existence is moving more towards this hyper liberal, hyper blue,
even
like
just
whatever you want to call it.
political
Yeah,
in
just
general.
political in general. And I think that, I'm not claiming any sides here. I'm not claiming blue. I'm not claiming red. I'm not claiming pink or like violet. Whatever you want to be. You can be whatever you want to be. I'm probably not with you on any particular side. But what I am saying is that I don't think it's right that certain people are trying to shut other people up because they don't agree with their perspective or with their point of view. I think that you should be able to have a perspective and have a point of view and have something to say, even if it's really dumb and even if no one agrees with you and even if like it's really preposterous in many ways. I think that you should still be able to have that reference and have that point of view on things. And I just think it's really, really strange that we live in a time that if you think a certain way or if you act a certain way or say certain things in the context of society or in the context of online platforms, that you can be canceled or deplatformed or villainized for saying such things. That is just really strange. And I don't think it bodes well for the future if we just continue to allow that, if we keep going the way things are going and we just don't, get caught up in the rift, if we don't allow anything to change or to shift. And we just hope that, somewhere along the way, this thing's going to even itself out and we're going to be back to normal.
Mm.
I personally don't think that that's in the cards because I don't think that issues just fix themselves.
Yeah, for me, I think it just doesn't allow for forgiveness to happen if somebody truly like messed up in an area, in a personal relationship or in a marriage or in a friendship. You would confront that person and
Mm-hmm.
try to right your wrong. But in a public eye or in these situations that you just described, it's so easy to just, like, if you are so opposing to most of the crowd in a view, then they don't want to hear you at all. They meaning the crowd. There are some people like us that I think a lot of you who are listening to our podcast can probably relate or associate more with the people who have opposing views to majority of people. And you find yourself in that place and there's like a tug of war in your heart of, I truly care about people who have other opinions than me. And I want to respect them and I want to love them. I want to listen to them. I want to hear their stories. I want to hear why they believe what they believe. I want to hear how they came to that conclusion. I want to hear about their upbringing because that contributes to the why you think the way you do.
That is so important.
And people just have lost that art, I think. And I think a lot of it comes down to every opinion being aired out into the wind.
Yeah.
And
well, there's this idea that, if you disagree with me, you must hate me. And if you hate me, then I have to defend myself. And so there's this insecurity that's happening all over the place of people not being secure in themselves, I think, to begin, and then secure in what they believe. And so when someone else comes with an opposing idea or an opposing train of thought, rather than listen and inquire and ask questions and ask how they came to that conclusion and ask how that conclusion then brings a solution to the problem that they may be trying to discuss or to fix, all of a sudden we just like go into rage mode and like, no, that's stupid. And then we begin demonizing and villainizing people, not the idea, not the train of thought, but people themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's right. And this was even happening in the 40s and 50s. There was a lot of preachers and a lot of authors who were writing books, and they were, I think one thing that they were doing back then a little bit differently than we are today is that they would look at an ideology or a way of thinking and they would address that. They wouldn't attack it, but they would address it, such as one of the ones that's real in at least in these books is communism and Marxism. And so preachers and pastors and writers and leaders in the 40s and 50s would write about that particular ideology, that particular subset and way of thinking. But they wouldn't attack the people who maybe adhered to it, because those were the exact people that they were trying to reach with their message. It would be senseless to go and write or speak or create something for a particular group of people and then attack them in the midst of that creation. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You're not going to reach anyone or change anyone's mind or provoke a new way of thinking if that's your method of reaching them. And so they would look at the particular problem, whereas today we look at the person and we don't look at how maybe they were brought up or the school that they went to, or maybe they've only ever been exposed to one set and one way of thinking and one ideology. And so rather than looking at those variables and then understanding that, hey, you know, I'm not going to hate the person because, you know, they didn't, what could they have done? Like, they didn't get the opportunity to be exposed or to maybe hear different perspectives and different points of view. So it's really not their fault that this is where they find themselves. If anything, I should do my best to love them and to care for them and to maybe just begin having a conversation and asking questions from a place that's not so concerned with changing their mind, but more so getting them to make sure that they understand, or they believe what they believe because they understand it and hold convictions towards it, and not just like, oh, this is how I grew up, or this is what my really smart professor said, or something of that nature.
Right. Like having true reasoning that's yours, that you own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like what you said about, like, not attacking the person, just kind of addressing the opinion or the ideology or whatever. I think that's the method that truly works. It's just how can you speak to a time or a group of people now that is so I mean, even in media, like in like news broadcasting, you know, name them, Fox, CNN,
Reuters,
whatever one you want to say, all of them operate that same way of let's attack the person. And that's so hurtful. First and foremost, like, we all know what it's like to live with ourselves and live with the differing opinions that we have, and then to present it to somebody and to then be not only attacked for it, but to be completely just like shut down, or to have no value anymore or no ability to input anymore. That's really insane to just do that to somebody. But I feel like it's become so normal. So I think a really important thing that we're trying to do today is just like almost address how unnormal that is, like how not normal that is.
And then also how much the cultural climate is trying to convince you that it is in so many different ways that you might not even recognize or necessarily see. And I think that's the weirdest part of it all, is that there's so much work, so much money, so much effort going into trying to convince you that silencing people, canceling the way they think, discrediting them, and anyone who associates with them or near them or anything like that is also wrong as well. And so, you know, if we run that out 10 steps, what's really happening is that there is a subsect of people who believe that everything that they think is right and everything that anyone else who might have even a minute disagreement with their way of thinking is inherently wrong. And I think that's at least in a cultural context. This has nothing, I'm not speaking really in reference to like the Bible or like those are things that, you know, as believers, you know, Those are the intent. Like, those are the things that we hold fast to. But in a cultural setting, in a political setting, which I do think, those things are different, it's just really weird.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that I just keep coming back to. Is just, it's so strange. Even think about 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Think about how different things felt, how different things were, and how quickly it's devolved into this method. I mean, there's really this new method of dealing with people that we don't agree with or we don't like, and that is to twist and contort their heart and their posture and their way of thinking that may not be perfect, and in fact it most certainly isn't perfect, but contort it in such a way that we're demonizing it 10 steps further than it really needs to go, and we're airing out our feedback in the public sector against people that we might not agree with. But in the process, we're embellishing our disagreements so much further so that maybe we can develop a following, or maybe people will get caught up in a dramatic story, and it's really just silly more than anything.
Yeah. So where I also see this going, that I think is important to talk about, is the generations that are coming up after us, because they already don't know a world without public eye and a technological world, which is so wild to think about.
And we barely do.
But I think about Hudson. I think about our son, and I think about what all he'll be exposed to, and I think about how the value of keeping a peaceful, nurturing, loving home is when a world is so chaotic and so hot and bothered about everything, and so quick to just, even with kids, like hearing that a 12-year-old recently took his own life because of opinions of his classmates on the internet. That's
devastating.
Yeah, I don't even have words for that. I mean, and that's happening more often than we know, And so where do we go from here? Like, what part do we play in this? I think it goes back to, I've always been brought back to the scripture of, like, if you have something to say to somebody, or if you have like something that you disagree with, go right to the person.
Yep.
Oftentimes our assumptions are way bigger and drastic than they truly
the truth actually
are.
is. Yeah.
And so much can get lost in that. And one thing that you and I have learned, even in marriage, is assumptions never help anything.
And assumptions are almost never correct.
Exactly.
Almost never. I would say solid 98% of the time, assumptions are almost never correct.
Right. Because from the outside looking in with a marriage, for example, if I'm assuming that Nick is totally uninterested in my day, for example, but in reality, he is very focused on a project that he's working on, or fill in the blank. Like, you're just focused on what you have to do.
And there's a line of misunderstanding, but in your mind,
see that as, you're uninterested in me, you don't pay attention to me. It's my perception. It's not the truth. It's the way you're seeing the situation. The truth. I could say that it's the truth, but is it really the truth? No, it's not the truth. So I think that comes into play with our personal relationships, but also having a healthy perspective of how many people that aren't involved in your personal life do you really want to follow online? How many other people do you want to let into your
decision making
and your decision making?
The
because they do influence you.
Yeah, the part of this that I just wanted to quickly address, and I think that this is one of the biggest reasons I wanted to bring this up, is it makes it impossible. It absolutely makes it impossible to care about or to love people if this train of thought and this line of thinking is continued. If we are constantly, over embellishing people's intent and maybe their point of view and their frame of reference
Or
on
seeing
life,
things through a critical lens.
yes, then how in the world can you expect to love or care about someone or be willing to go and ask them questions about, why they think that way?
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Yeah.
there are some things that I think, there's some very, very heavy topics that I don't think, um, need to be encouraged or need to be, um, accepted. But many things I think are subset issues that we're just not willing to have conversations about because we don't want to, bother ourselves. We don't want to give them the time of day because in our minds, we already know exactly how they think. We know exactly, their upbringing. We know exactly how they came to these conclusions. And it makes it really, really hard for us to empathize and care about and love people because we just assume that we know everything about them
Yeah.
and that they're dumb and that they have no, I don't know, they have nothing of value to add or to give. And I think that's just a really shallow and really, really sad way to go through life.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I don't want to go through life that way. I want to be able to sit down with people that I don't agree with and that I staunchly disagree with, but not attack them and not even attack their ideology or their way of thinking, but more so inquire and ask questions and
Right.
have a genuine conversation about how they came to those conclusions and that be mutual and see how people might find benefit in that in the process of doing that and how people could potentially change their minds. I
Mm.
think that that's another thing that we just don't allow in this culture is for people to adapt and to grow and to change and to change their mind on ways that
Yeah.
maybe they once thought and they think now.
It reminds me of all the ways that Jesus often responded to people whenever they had a question or whenever,
Hmm.
say, a group of people, like a crowd, was doing something. I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe you're thinking one off the top of your head, but he always responded, typically, not always, but with a question to their
Mhm.
question. He wanted them to observe in their heart why they were doing what they were doing, like what was the motive there. And I think that is an art in itself with our friendships and our marriages and our relationships, even with our kids. Sometimes turning the question back onto somebody allows them to examine their motives, their heart, why they think the way that they think. And it allows for more, I think, richness in a conversation and for people to truly be heard. Because I think all of us are just looking to be understood. We're all looking
Yep.
to be heard. And oftentimes, whenever we're quick to be critical or quick to judge
Yeah.
or quick to shut somebody down, you're never understood in that. Neither of you are.
Yeah.
So that is more of the approach
Yeah.
I think we need to take.
Yeah, exactly. And man, like I don't know, if you're a Republican, like how often are you having conversations and inquiring about the thoughts and the conclusions of, maybe a friend that's liberal? Do you even have a friend that's liberal? Or if you're a liberal, like how often are you having conversations with a friend that's maybe conservative and inquiring and asking about how they maybe came to those conclusions?
I
Or
hate
if you're a
parties.
Christian, how often are you having conversations with a friend who's maybe Jewish or Muslim and having conversations about, how did you come to that? And there's become this culture and this time that if we associate with anyone who's not just like me, then that's just not right. And if you're talking or if you're discussing or pondering ideas with anyone who doesn't think just like you do, because after all, you know what the truth is. You know the exact truth. You know the perfect line of thinking. Like, I mean, if anyone really thinks that way in context to cultural and political and, maybe other just humanitarian issues, I think I think that's just a little, I'm not going to say it's silly, but it is very bold. It's very bold to think that, I would even say it's arrogant to think that, we have all the cultural and political issues figured out and solved, 100% in our minds and in our heads. And,
Hmm.
because it's not that I don't think we do, it's I know that we don't. And I'm not claiming to be one who does. And I'm wanting to become willing to learn and willing to have conversation and discussion. And that's just the kind of person I want to be, and not even so much of like a type of action I want to do or a type of action I want to take. It's just more so the type of man and type of person I want to be. I want to be someone who's willing to listen to others and not shut them down because they might think a little bit differently than I do.
Yeah. I think you and I used to have a tendency to not be that way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure we did.
I think we've matured in that area, but I hope that we continue to give each other grace to do that, but then that other people who are listening, you know, whether you're in a close relationship with somebody who probably needs to grow in that, or you do yourself, I hope that you give yourself the grace to do that, and the people around you as well.
And don't be scared of people. Like, people are just people. Like Chelsea said, they just want to be understood and loved and cared about just like you do.
Yeah.
And I think that we're just, in many ways, I think we have a fear and an insecurity of people, or that they might challenge our thinking or something. Like, don't be scared of people. Like, just be a real person, and be okay to say that you don't have everything figured out, because you don't, and they don't either. And we're all on this journey of learning more and changing as we get older and as we grow wiser, and that is okay, and that should be accepted, and that should be admired. Yeah, I think if there ever comes a time, which there very well could, that people are saying it's wrong to ever change your mind, man, that's a scary time. That's going to be a really, really scary, scary time in culture. And I don't think that it is imminent, but I can definitely see signs of it. And I think that you don't have to look too far to see those signs as well. And that's all I really wanted to get out, is that I just want to encourage you to be open-minded, to not demonize people,
Right.
to not even demonize the way that they think, but try to seek and understand and have meaningful discussion, meaningful conversation, talk to people in person, eye to eye, face to face. And I think that quickly we'll all see that we're a lot more alike than we are different, even though news outlets and media tries to tell us that we're all so different and we can't get along. And we can't find resolution. And there, one side is wrong and the other side is right, and everyone thinks that they're right, and no one's willing to ever hardly say that they were wrong on something and that they apologize and change their mind. And I just think that if we did, I think we'd all be a lot better off.
Definitely. Well, this wasn't as long as the last one, but I feel like it was meaningful.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. But we would love to hear what you guys think on this. If this happens to be up on YouTube, we can read the comments. But with previous podcasts, we would never really know what the dealio is on like how you guys thought of it. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation. It was heavy on my heart. It's been heavy on my heart. And I just think that this is one of the glaring things in culture and society right now that so many of us are feeling, but we just don't know how to put words to.
Yeah.
And I think that the sooner we figure it out, and the sooner that we begin to have conversations about this and really unearth what it means to be human and to have dialogue and maybe think differently and let that be okay and not let that be demonized, then I think that that's going to move us in the direction that we all inevitably want to go in. We want to move to this space of being free to think and say what we want to say without fear or without worry or without stress of having repercussions in a society and in a country, at least here in the United States. I know that we have many, many listeners around the world, but at least here in the States, in a society that claims to have free speech, the fear of being canceled and the fear of not having that free speech is very, very real. And it's very, I would just say it's very forefront and very talked about right now.
We can always be a part of that change. I think that's what we're trying to do with these podcasts is even if you feel like you're small or insignificant, that's first of all not true. Mm-hmm. But And even if you feel like you don't have as much of a voice as you would like to, like, you can still influence the people around you. And I think the best marketing tactic for like a book to even be shared, this is,
Word of mouth.
just word of mouth,
How willing
with-
are you, how willing are you to take the advice of an influencer versus your best friend?
Right.
I think,
Your best friend knows you.
so. Anyway,
That's all, guys.
that's the podcast. Yeah,
That's the
so
sitch.
excited to pick up next week on a conversation that will continue. And thank you for listening. I'm really excited to be back, and these conversations are definitely different.
Very different.
Yeah, they're in many ways a breath of fresh air, and then also in many ways a new challenge.
Yeah,
And I think that's good.
exactly. Well, we love you guys, and we'll see you in the next podcast episode. Peace.